Hello. For this video, I am going to be going over the Pete Hegseth Senate confirmation hearing for the cabinet position of Secretary of Defense. The hearing total was over 4 hours long. I'm hoping to break it down into about 20 minutes. I've just got a handful of senators' statements and questions, and I'll just give a quick bio of who Pete Hegseth is and just some thoughts on all of it. He's definitely one of the more controversial picks of Trump's for cabinet positions, but he is still very likely to get confirmed. I would say with today being Trump's inauguration day, as I'm recording this video, Pete Hegseth is likely to get confirmed within the next few days, despite the controversies, and probably a strong split where I would say most Democrats will vote against him, and probably, if not all, and the Republicans will vote for him. Um, and I'll just say I did watch the whole thing. Um, The reason I didn't include a lot of other talking points from other senators is because most of it was the same thing. A lot of Democrats asked similar questions or brought up similar problems, and just kept repeating it, trying to get him to answer. Whether he'd answer it or not, is one thing. Whereas a lot of Republicans also said the same type of thing or gave him super easy softball questions like, "Do you love your country?" And he's like, "Yeah, of course I love my country." Stuff like that. But tried to include some relevant stuff to at least get most of the background and most of the controversy covered. Jumping into it, Pete Hegseth, who is he? Well, he was the host of Weekend Fox and Friends, friend of Donald Trump's. He was a former Army National Guard officer. He served at Guantanamo Bay and in Iraq and Afghanistan between 2004 and 2006. Um, some of the statements he's made about if he takes over and runs the Department of Defense um, that I like is he's talked about increasing standards and accountability, especially among the higher ups, which I think is great. I think having high standards and accountability for high powerful positions in the military is an important thing for sure. He's also talked about increasing efficiency and reducing spending. That's something that I think a lot of America has talked about. Former military people that I know, former military people who I've read stories about, have pretty much all said similar things in regards to wasted time, wasted money, wasted like equipment that goes to waste, and just wasted resources in general. So if we could get that cleaned up and spend less on our military while being just as effective or more effective, that would be great. Will he be able to do it? Guess we have to see, but that would be great if he could. Now, some of the negatives that a lot of Democrats did bring up is that he has previously expressed a strong belief that women don't belong in the military. He held that belief for several years, actually, talked about it in books, in interviews, live on air. He eventually changed that belief to just women don't belong in combat roles. And he maintained that belief as recent as just a month prior to Donald Trump nominating him, uh, in which he got rid of that belief too. And he suddenly thinks that women can serve in combat roles. He just thinks that certain standards need to be made sure that they're met. Um, so, despite holding a very strong stance against women in the military and women in combat for a long period of time, he changed it just because he got the nod from Donald Trump, basically. So the question is, does he believe that, or did he just change it to try and get be more well liked? And that's about it. We'll jump into some of the more stuff. Here's Senator Jack Reed. I'm going to play a clip from. He talks a bit about like some moral questions, and he talks about the veterans programs that Pete Hegseth was running prior to this nomination, or after his military service, I should say.
Mr. Hegseth, another reason I'm deeply concerned about your nomination is your disregard for the law of armed conflict and your support for service members who have been convicted of war crimes. You have championed the pardoning of military members who were turned in by their fellow soldiers and SEALs. And let me emphasize that. They weren't discovered by reporters. They were turned in by fellow soldiers and fellow SEALs. And also pardoning of military contractors convicted of killing 14 Iraqi citizens without cause. You have also advocated for the restitution of interrogation methods like waterboarding that have been defined as torture, and you have belittled the advice and counsel of the Judge Advocates General while on deployment. In your book, The War on Warriors, you write, quote, "Should we follow the Geneva Convention If our warriors are forced to follow rules arbitrarily and asked to sacrifice more lives so that international tribunals feel better about themselves, aren't we just better off in winning our wars according to our own rules? Mr. Hegseth, I would ask that you explain how you, if confirmed, would maintain good order and discipline within our forces and the support of our allies and partners by rejecting international law and the law of war.
So before moving on, I want to touch on that. This is definitely like a morally gray area, right? Especially because I'm just going to say a lot of Trump supporters and Republicans were kind of campaigning Trump as an anti-war, anti-violence guy. And Pete Hegseth is actually somebody who, like the Senator Jack Reed mentioned, has talked about using more lethality and not being so afraid to make strong commitments toward getting the job done that you're worried about doing the morally right thing or following, laws and rules against war crimes, criminal war crimes, right? And Pete Hegseth was responsible for talking to Donald Trump about some of Trump's pardons of military criminals, war criminals, during Trump's first term. Uh, I don't know how you feel on it, but for me, I think it is very important that you, even in war type situations, you need to not be evil, basically, is how I see it. Like, there is a line that shouldn't be crossed. And even if your end goal is good, or at least in your mind good, how bad can you get to achieve that goal? But, anyways, continuing on.
I'm also concerned about your abilities as a competent manager of organizations far less complex than the Department of Defense. From 2008 to 2010, you led the organization Veterans for Freedom, which had an annual budget of less than $10 million. In each year you were in charge, expenses far exceeded revenues until the organization teetered on bankruptcy and had to be merged with another group. In fact, according to public reporting, an independent forensic accountant reviewed the organization's finances and discovered evidence of gross financial mismanagement. I would note that this report has not been made available to any government agencies, which is, I think, alarming. But a Republican advisor to you during your tenure at the organization, who read the report, stated, and I quote, "I watched him run an organization very poorly, lose the confidence of donors. The organization ultimately folded and was forced to merge with another organization who individuals felt could run and manage funds on behalf of donors more responsibly than he could. I don't know how he's going to run an organization with an $857 billion budget and 3 million individuals." And that is the only comment we've had and the only access we've had to the forensic report. A similar thing happened with the Concerned Veterans for America, a second veterans group that you led from 2011 until 2016. During those 5 years, tax records show that the organization spent more than it raised. Just as troubling are reports that a significant amount of debt was incurred from social events and parties filled with excessive drinking and questionable personal behavior. Mr. Hegseth, I hope you will explain what actions you will take, if confirmed, to be a better steward of Defense Department's large budget. Finally, while I appreciate our meeting last week, it is unacceptable.
All right, so there, it's basically saying, yes, you've run organizations that have been of military type in the past for veterans, but they weren't run well. And in fact, they had bad money management and weren't run well by him. And he eventually stopped being involved in the management of them. So, like I said earlier, things I like is how he talks about increasing efficiency and reducing spending. Jack Reed points out, well, you don't have a very high success rate with the organizations that you have uh, been part of running. Now, I'm just going to jump into the next one, which is Tammy Duckworth. Now, she's pretty angry, I'm going to be honest, and this one's about standards. And I'll explain after the fact why I believe she's so angry, for those of you who don't know who Tammy Duckworth is.
usually hangs over my desk here in the Senate, and you should be familiar with it. It's the same copy that hung over my desk at Walter Reed every single day that I woke up and fought my way back because I wanted to go back and serve next to my buddies who saved my life. This same copy, these words are repeated over and over and over again. And let me read out two things to you, two sentences. I will always place the mission first, and I am disciplined, physically and mentally tough, trained and proficient in my warrior task. Mr. Hegseth, our troops follow these words every single day, and they man up and they pack their rucksacks and they go to war. And they deserve a leader who can lead them, not a leader who wants to lower the standards for himself or raising the standards for other people. And by the way, our troops already meet the standards. We ask troops to man that ship, fight that fire, fly that helicopter until their very last breath. And they do that every single day. They cannot be led by someone who's not competent to do the job. How can we ask these warriors to train and perform the absolute highest standards when you are asking us to lower the standards to make you the Secretary of Defense simply because you are buddies with our president-elect? And by the way...
So, Tammy, to give you a background on her, for those who don't know her and why she's so upset with how he talks about standards and why she's pretty angry. Well, first of all, part of it is his words and previous talking about women in the military. Now, Tammy, she is a retired Army National Guard lieutenant colonel. She comes from an extremely long line of military veterans dating all the way back to the Revolutionary War. She served in the reserve from 1992 through 1996 and in the Guard from 96 to 2014. Now, while she was fighting in the Iraq War, she was a helicopter pilot for the Army. In 2004, her helicopter was hit by an RPG fired by Iraqi insurgents. The damage led to her losing both of her legs and some mobility in her right arm. Despite the injuries, what she's talking about when she was in the medical hospital, she was awarded a medical waiver to continue serving in the Illinois Army National Guard for another 10 years until she retired as lieutenant colonel. She served as the director of the Illinois Department of Veterans Affairs from 2006 to 2009 and was assistant secretary for public and intergovernmental affairs at the United States Department of Veteran Affairs from 2009 to 2011. In Congress, she's been on the Committee of Armed Services, the Committee of Commerce and Science and Transportation, chair of the Subcommittee on Aviation Operations. As I said, she was a helicopter pilot, Safety and Security. Also been on the Committee for Foreign Relations. Now, regardless of where you sit politically, I think hearing her accolades, how she fought, her resume basically makes her a military badass, basically. Like, she deserves absolute respect and praise for her service, especially with the injuries and her wanting to continue on. Also, with her history and the experience she has with working in veteran organizations and serving for that long period of time and serving on these committees that are bigger in Congress, you could honestly probably say that Tammy Duckworth is much more qualified than Pete Hegseth to be Secretary of Defense than he is. So it makes sense that she's pretty angry about him being the nomination. And there was a lot more to her statement that I'm not going to go over because I'm just going to be honest, she goes pretty hard on him. And some of it's probably not relevant, but it makes sense that she's mad and wants to just express that she's mad about it. So I'll move on to the next now. For this one, this is Tim Kaine. What Tim Kaine does is he kind of goes over the more sketchy and controversial stuff, not just the unqualified stuff of Pete Hegseth. So we'll just jump into that.
Admitted that you had sex at that hotel in October 2017. You said it was consensual, isn't that correct?
Anything,
You've admitted that it was consensual, and you were still married, and you just had a child by another woman.
again,
How do you explain your
completely
judgment?
false charges against me,
No,
fully
wait.
investigated, and I was completely clear.
You have admitted that you had sex while you were married to wife 2 after you just had fathered a child by wife 3. You've admitted that. Now, if it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
It was a false claim then and a false claim now.
If it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
That was a false claim.
So
Just
you
talking
can't,
about a hypothetical.
so you can't tell me whether someone who has committed a sexual assault is disqualified from being Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I know in my instance, and I'm talking about my instance only, it was a false claim.
But you acknowledge
And
you
it was
cheat, but you
fully
acknowledge
investigated.
that you cheated on your wife and that you cheated on the woman by whom you had just fathered a child. You have admitted that.
I will allow your words to speak for themselves.
You're not retracting that today. That's good. I assume that in each of your weddings, you've pledged to be faithful to your wife. You've taken an oath to do that, haven't you?
Senator, as I've acknowledged to everyone in this committee, not a perfect person, not claiming to
But
be.
no, I just asked a simple question. You've taken an oath like you would take an oath to be Secretary of Defense in all of your weddings to be faithful to your wife. Is that correct?
I have failed in things in my life, and thankfully I'm redeemed by my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
In finalizing divorces from your first and second wives, were there non-disclosure agreements in connection with those divorces?
Senator, not that I'm aware of.
If there were, would you agree to release those first and second wives from any confidentiality agreement?
Senator, it's not something I'm aware of.
But if there were, you would agree to release them from a confidentiality agreement?
Senator, that's not my responsibility.
Did you ever engage in any acts of physical violence against any of your wives?
Senator, absolutely not.
But you would agree with me that if someone had committed physical violence against a spouse, that would be disqualifying to serve as Secretary of Defense, correct?
Senator, absolutely not have I ever done that.
You would agree that that would be a disqualifying offense, would you not?
Senator, you're talking about a hypothetical.
I don't think it's a hypothetical. Violence against spouses occurs every day. And if you as a leader are not capable of saying that physical violence against a spouse should be a disqualifying fact for being secretary of the most powerful nation in the world, you're demonstrating an astonishing lack of judgment. The incident in Monterey led to a criminal charge, a criminal investigation, a private settlement, and a cash payment to the woman who filed the complaint. And there was also a non-disclosure agreement, correct?
It was a confidential settlement agreement off of a nuisance lawsuit.
Right. During an interview, you claimed that you settled the matter because you were worried that if it became public, it might hurt your career. Do you maintain that you were blackmailed?
Senator, I maintain that false claims were made against me. And ultimately,
Your attorney
those
used
false
the phrase,
claims, I have the opportunity to attest my innocence in those false claims.
But you didn't reveal any of this to President Trump or the transition team as they were considering you to be nominated for Secretary of Defense. You didn't reveal the action. You didn't reveal the criminal complaint. You didn't reveal the criminal investigation. You didn't reveal the settlement. You didn't reveal the cash payment. Why didn't you inform the commander-in-chief and the transition team of this very relevant event?
Senator, I've appreciated every part of the process with the transition team. They have been open and honest with me. We've had great conversations between the two of us, and I appreciate the opportunity that President-elect Trump has given me.
You chose not to reveal this, right? Because you knew it would hurt your chances. So you chose not to reveal this really important thing to the commander-in-chief and the transition team because you were worried about your chances rather than trying to be candid with the future president of the United States. Are there any other important facts that you chose not to reveal to the president-elect and his team as they were considering you to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I sit here before you an open book, as everyone who's watched this process.
With multiple non-disclosure and confidentiality agreements tying the hands of many people who would like to comment to us. Much has been made of your workplace behavior as a leader of nonprofit veterans organizations and as a Fox News contributor. Were you fired from either of the leadership positions with the nonprofits?
I was the leader. I was the CEO of Concerned Veterans for America and the executive director of Vets for Freedom.
Were you fired from either of them?
And I was never fired from a veterans organization.
Do you have non-disclosure agreements with either of those organizations?
Not that I'm aware of, Senator.
Many of your work colleagues have said that you show up for work under the influence of alcohol or drunk. I know you've denied that, but you would agree with me, right, that if that was the case, that would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense.
Senator, those are all anonymous false claims, and the totality
They're not anonymous.
The letters on the record here.
They're not anonymous.
On the record, people
We've
who've
seen
worked with
records
me
with
at
names
Vets
attached
for
to
Freedom,
them.
Concerned Vets for America, and Fox News
One of
attributing
your
to me
colleagues
working
said-
hard every day on behalf of
One of
my
your
mission.
colleagues said that you got drunk at an event at a bar and chanted, "Kill all Muslims." Another colleague, not anonymous, we have this, said that you took coworkers to a strip club. You were drunk, you tried to dance with strippers, you had to be held off the stage, and one of your employees in that event filed a sexual harassment charge as a result of it. Now, I know you deny these things, but isn't that the kind of behavior that, if true, would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator, anonymous false charges.
They're not anonymous. And I'll just conclude and say this to the chairman. You claim that this was all anonymous. We have seen records with names attached to all of these, including the name of your own mother. So don't make this into some anonymous press thing. We have seen multiple names of colleagues consistently throughout your career that have talked about your abusive actions,
Chairman, I think he's over his time. He's way over his time.
I now yield.
So Tim Kaine here kind of went over some of the most controversial or most scandalous things that they were able to find on Pete Hegseth. Like Pete said, I guess not all of it was proven. But with Tim saying stuff like, do you think that would be disqualifying? Or, if there are NDAs or confidentiality agreements, would you release those? Now, he's saying that because obviously in their research and in their findings with him, they found obviously a fair bit of damaging stuff. And the question is, how much more damaging is the stuff behind the confidentiality agreements and the NDAs, right? Because this guy is going to be the leader of the United States military. Pete Hegseth is going to be the leader of the U.S. military. Now imagine if you have even more damaging stuff than they've already found that is hidden behind those confidentiality agreements or those NDAs, and an enemy of the U.S. finds it out. Or, somebody finds it out and uses it to blackmail him. Like, oh, you want to keep your job? You want to keep this cushy thing? You want to not be, found out to be this terrible person? Oh, well, you got to do this for me. And it's a job that has so many responsibilities and so much power that it certainly is a worry if there is more damaging stuff out there than what has already been gone through over in these hearings and been reported, that could be a significant problem if he was to get the position. I mean, Kaine was maybe a little overboard with it and kind of pushed it, farther, and probably said some stuff that isn't, he's like, oh, could this be true? And, maybe it's not. But the fact is, you do have to worry about that with a position like that. Also, this video, I was hoping for 20, probably going to go closer to 30 or a little more, but that's all right. Considering the hearing was over 4 hours, I feel like that's not too bad. I will now move on to the next portion, which here is my Republican senator. This is an interesting one for sure. This is Mark Wayne Mullen from Oklahoma.
The senator from Virginia starts bringing up the fact that what if you showed up drunk to your job? How many senators have showed up drunk to vote at night? Have any of you guys asked them to step down and resign from their job? And don't tell me you haven't seen it, because I know you have. And then how many senators do you know have got a divorce before cheating on their wives? Did you ask them to step down? No. But it's for show. You guys make sure you make a big show and point out the hypocrisy because the man's made a mistake. And you want to sit there and say that he's not qualified? Give me a joke. I mean, it is so ridiculous that you guys...
All right, so I'm just going to jump right into another clip quick, because that is the perfect point for it. And then I will talk about what he said. So here we are.
Blake understood. Humans are savage in nature. No matter how much you try to dress it up, to disguise it. Blake saw society's true face. Chose to be a parody of it. A joke. I heard joke once. Man goes to doctor. Says he's depressed. Life seems harsh and cruel. Says he feels all alone in threatening world. Doctor says treatment is simple. The great clown Pagliacci is in town. Go see him. That should pick you up. Man bursts into tears. But doctor, he says, I am Pagliacci. Good joke. Everybody laugh. Roll on snare drum. Curtains.
All right. So, first off, chose that clip for a couple reasons. One, it's literally the first thing I thought of when he said, "Give me a joke." Now, secondly, while I get his point that they are being hypocritical because some of them have done things that they are complaining about another person doing, but it's not the gotcha he thinks it is. Uh, the Secretary of Defense is a more powerful and more important position than a single member of the House of Representatives or a single member of the Senate. It also proves that, in fact, his give me a joke is they are the joke. And this is our circus of clowns that we've allowed to be elected. I mean, I'm not sure what I expected a guy with two first names like Mark Wayne. And no offense to Oklahoma, but maybe the reason it ranks 49th in education and 49th in healthcare is because they elect clowns like that. Uh, Everything he said just proves that they are a joke. Now, to move on back to my closing points here, or to move on to my closing points here, I should say. Uh, so, aside from just the questionable statements he's made and his questionable past, there's another part about Pete Hegseth that really wasn't talked about too much in this hearing. One of it was brought up briefly, and he did talk about his religion a lot. Um, but he has stated in writings and in interviews that he advocates for a modern crusades. And if you didn't know, he was going to be part of Biden's inauguration, and they ended up canceling using him because there were concerns over tattoos and affiliations he had with white nationalist and Christian extremist groups. Now, Pete tries to play it off that the tattoo of concern is his Jerusalem cross, but it was reported, and you can find, it had nothing to do with the Jerusalem cross. It had to do with his Deuce Volt tattoo. Now, if you don't know, he has talked about his modern crusades, and Deuce Volt was a famous saying that got popular for the crusades and has been used by Christian and white nationalist extremist groups since then. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the crusades and you don't see why that's a big deal, I'll just give a brief, quick rundown. So the Crusades started a little over 1,000 years ago, and it was some of the bloodiest wars and conquests of that era. Now, depending on whose history you read of the Crusades, which side or from what point of view, you can find that there's a decent chance that some of the Crusades, these took place, by the way, over hundreds of years, multiple Crusades, but some of them you could say were justified. They were just defending their land and their freedoms from invaders or reclaiming land that was recently taken away from them from invaders, right? But depending on the other side, they would also say, no, it was about conquering our people and basically eradicating their differing religion or differing ethnicity or society uh, in favor of the Christian crusaders. Now, regardless of whose history you read, whether it's from the Catholic side or the Islamic side, pretty much everybody can agree that the Fourth Crusade was terrible. The Fourth Crusade basically ended up being Christians attacking a different ethnicity and nationality of other Christians and stealing their resources and land. And it was so bad that the entire army that participated in that was excommunicated from the Catholic Church. Now, as the Secretary of Defense, I don't think it should be in their ordinary views that you might need a modern crusades. Okay, we already have had enough problems with the Middle East and Islamic extremism, and it's honestly dating back to the Crusades is where you can find some of the reasoning for why certain Muslim terrorist groups and Islamic extremist groups hate the Western culture and Western religion is because of things that happened all the way back then. we don't need to bring that type of war, a war over religion, or a war to push territory to try and change things, because it's going to end up bloody, violent, and we just don't need that. We've done a good job of getting largely out of the Middle East, and we need to stay away from that type of thing. But that's pretty much all I have on Pete Hegseth. Like I said, he will almost certainly get confirmed. Um, I do not think he's qualified. I do not think he should get confirmed, but he almost certainly will. That's all, and thank you.